Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to break down Hamilton Helmer's 7 Powers. And let me tell you, this isn't just another business book. It's basically required reading for leaders at places like Stripe, Spotify, and Sequoia Capital. It's considered the definitive guide on how to build a company that actually lasts. So you've probably heard that classic Silicon Valley mantra, right? Ideas are easy, execution is everything. But here, Reed Hastings, who obviously knows a thing or two about building a company like Netflix, comes in with a really crucial warning. He's saying that brilliant execution is absolutely necessary, but on its own, it's just not enough. Okay, so that leads to a huge question, doesn't it? If just grinding harder and executing flawlessly isn't the whole story, then what is? What's that secret ingredient that turns a temporary success into a business that can dominate for decades? Well, according to Helmer, the answer is one simple word: power. And, we're not talking about power in the sense of authority or control. We're talking about a very specific set of business conditions. This is the real goal of any good strategy: to attain power. Okay, let's break that down. Persistent differential returns. I know, it sounds a little academic, right? But it's really just a fancy way of saying you have the ability to consistently make more money, higher profits than your competitors, year in and year out. Power is the thing that makes that possible. Now, this is absolutely crucial. For something to be a real power, it has to have two sides. First, there's the benefit. It has to actually make you more money, right? Either through higher prices, lower costs, or needing less investment. But just as important is the barrier. It has to actively stop your competitors from just copying what you do and eating up all your profits. Because think about it, a benefit without a barrier, that's just a temporary leg up, not a lasting advantage. So the big question is, how do you actually build this powerful two-sided advantage? Well, Helmer lays out 7 distinct paths to get there, and he calls them the 7 powers. Let's think of these as the 7 specific tools you can pull out of your strategic toolkit. All right, first up, we've got a classic one: scale economies. This is super simple. The bigger you get, the cheaper it becomes to produce every single thing you sell. The benefit is obvious. You have lower costs. But here's the kicker. The barrier is what's so powerful. Any smaller competitor has to burn an insane amount of cash, probably losing money for a long time, just to even try and catch up to your scale. And this chart, wow, this chart on Netflix just illustrates the point perfectly. When Netflix spends $100 million on a new show, they get to spread that huge cost across more than 200 million subscribers. That's just 48 cents per person. 48 cents! Now look at a smaller competitor, like Australia's Stan. For them to afford that same show, it would cost them over $43 per person. How can they possibly compete with that? The short answer? They can't. That is a massive, massive barrier created by pure scale. Okay, power number 2 is something you see all over the tech world: network economies. This is when the product itself actually gets better and more valuable as more people use it. I mean, the classic example, of course, is Facebook. The reason you're on Facebook is because all your friends and family are on Facebook. The barrier here is just immense. Who's going to join a brand new social network if nobody they know is there? This is the kind of power that leads to those winner-take-all markets. Now, power number 3, counter positioning. This one is so interesting. This happens when a new company comes along with a business model that's not just better, but it's one that the big established players simply can't copy without totally wrecking their own existing profitable business. So the barrier, and this is the ironic part, is the big company's own success. So this is a really crucial point. Let's make sure we get this right. You might think of Kodak getting wiped out by digital cameras, but that's not quite counter positioning. Why? Because for Kodak, the digital camera business was just way less profitable than their film business. But then you look at a company like Vanguard. Now that's a perfect example. They came out with these super low-cost index funds. Their competitors could have copied them, but it would have meant killing their own super profitable high-fee funds. They were totally stuck. And that paralysis gave Vanguard all the power. All right, next up we have switching costs. This power is all about making it too painful or expensive for your customer to leave you for someone else. Just think about a big company that uses something like Salesforce. Once you have all your customer data, all your workflows, and thousands of employees trained on that one system, the cost and the sheer chaos of trying to switch to a new system, even if it's a little bit better, is just astronomical. You're locked in. And power number 5 is branding. This is that special kind of magic that lets a company charge way more for a product that might be, for all intents and purposes, identical to a cheaper one. And Tiffany & Co., they are the absolute masters of this. Sure, they sell jewelry, but what people are really buying is the trust, the history, and that feeling of opening that iconic little blue box. And here's the barrier: you just can't buy that kind of reputation overnight. It takes decades of careful investment and consistency to build that trust. Okay, power number 6 is having a cornered resource. This is when you have special access to something valuable that your competitors just can't get their hands on. This could be something obvious like a key patent or the perfect retail location, but what's really interesting is that it can also be about talent. Think about Amazon's senior leadership team. They have an average tenure of 15 years. That collective brainpower, that deep knowledge of how to operate at Amazon's crazy scale, that's a human resource that no competitor can just go out and buy. And that brings us to our 7th and final power, process power. This is when your company's unique way of doing things is so effective that it consistently produces better or cheaper results. The textbook example here is Toyota. They literally give tours of their factories and explain their production system, but competitors still can't fully copy it. Why? Because it's not a set of instructions. It's embedded in the entire culture. See, it's not just a checklist you can copy. It's a whole way of thinking that's baked into the company. All right, so we've gone through all 7 powers. These are what Helmer calls the statics, like a snapshot of what makes a company strong. But the real question is, how and when do you actually build them? This is where the dynamics come in, and it's all about the journey. And Homer maps this whole journey out on a timeline, which is just incredibly useful. It shows that you don't build all these powers at the same time. So early on, in the origination phase, before you even have a product market fit, you can start building power with a cornered resource or a clever counter-positioning move. Then, as you hit that rocket ship growth phase, the takeoff, that is your moment to build scale economies, network economies, and switching costs. And finally, once things mature and you hit stability, you can shift your focus to strengthening your position with brand and process power. So you see, it's not just a random list of 7 things. It's a strategic roadmap that tells you when to focus on building each one. So, after all that, what's the big takeaway? What's the real point of strategy, anyway? I think this quote from Warren Buffett just absolutely nails it. Strategy isn't just about operational excellence or trying harder than everyone else. It's about consciously picking a path that leads to one of these 7 powers. Because without that fundamental power structure, even the most brilliant manager in the world is going to struggle with a business that's just built on a weak foundation. And that leaves us with one final, really important question for you. Whether you're an investor, a founder, or you work at a company, I want you to think about the business you're in. It's not enough to just ask if you're building a power. The real strategic question is, are you building the right power for the right stage your company is in right now? Because figuring out that path is what separates a flash-in-the-pan success from a company that truly endures.